Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Why are you a bit quiet? Is that Hi, Himesh.
Hi there.
Good to see you. How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Very well, thanks. You don't need to know this, but Himesh came to my house a couple of days ago. I cooked salad and roti, and we had a wonderful hangout. We've been pen pals for like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
So you slid into the DMs.
I did. Nothing inappropriate, obviously. He's straight and married, and I'm a happily married man. But it was a fangirl sliding to his DM, because if you know his work, you know that he's a national treasure for us in England. He is one of the greatest actors we have ever had. I know. I gushed about him at Ireland, but he really is formidable. And so let's talk about how we got here. Shall I lead?
Please.
Okay, let's start from the start. You are from an Indian family, born and raised in the UK, the south of England, and you somehow managed to avoid being a doctor and became an actor.
Yeah.
And you started out in a show, if any of you have been to the UK, then you may know of a show called EastEnders, which is a massive soap for us. Yeah, man, massive soap for us.
That might be the first time that EastEnders has had a shout out with something
It's the best of the soaps. And so can you tell us a bit about how you went from not being on TV to EastEnders doing one of the hardest jobs in soap, and then how we got here?
Yes, I always loved acting from when I was a kid, and very fortunately, and I suppose bucking a stereotype, my parents were very encouraging of it. So they involved me in like a local youth theatre, and then that youth theatre in Cambridge called the Young Actors Company, they had an agency. So I went out and did a bit of extra work actually before I did anything, any auditions or anything like that. And then on the last day of my GCSE, so I would have been 16, this was in May or June of 2007, I got this audition for EastEnders, and my dad drove me down there, and 2 auditions later I got this role, and my life changed over a summer. I found myself on this show that I watched, not religiously per se growing up, but like it was just an institution. Everyone, especially at Christmas, you always watch EastEnders, because someone was going to die.
Someone was always, and someone's always had an affair.
Yeah. And when I left the show, actually, I wanted to do a scene where my character was like, "What is this place? 8 people have been murdered in 9 years.
And there aren't many police officers around, and I just think,
what's going on?
This is the hotbed of crime.
Yeah,
We should be
yeah.
here all the time."
Where am I?
It's really funny.
Sadly, they didn't buy it. But so I found myself on this show, and it completely changed my life. I worked with some amazing actors, many of whom I admired, growing up. And they really guided me through. It was, I kind of took it in my stride. I had, as I said, a very supportive family. But, I was suddenly thrust into a weird form of fame where no one knows you. They know this character that you're playing. And so they just sort of shout EastEnders at you when you're walking down the street. And it was quite, a pretty young age, and I'm only sort of now going, well, yeah, that must have had some impact on me, I suppose. But again, there were some really key factors that meant that I kind of got through it without too much trauma.
I know this isn't a panel about EastEnders, but I do.
It is now, guys.
When you got the job, so I left England. I've been in America for 17 years, and I left England pretty much about the time that you got on the show. And so my questions are about yes, good ring tune. Anyway, so when you got the show, did you know what the arc was going to be for your character? And because I don't know an Asian family on EastEnders, my question is, did it feel quite stereotypical, or did you think, oh, this is really fresh, and where did that go during your almost 10 years? Did it feel like they really wanted to portray an Asian family in England, or this is just a family in England who just so happens to be Asian?
It felt more like the former. It felt more like they wanted to sort of have a South Asian family and represent something quite specific. They were a Muslim family, and when I actually auditioned for the role, they were going to explore the storyline with my character, which they actually ended up doing and writing another character. But the main thing that they wanted to tackle was my character initially, as I said, and then it ended up being my brother coming out to his family and sort of what that does within a sort of family unit.
That's weird. Gay Muslims don't exist.
No, I know. I said that to them. I said, listen, this isn't real.
Yeah. We don't have those. Only whites have them.
But they didn't listen. And then they did it.
EastEnders is a fantasy show.
Yeah.
And so, when you are on a show like EastEnders or any soap, we have a few soaps, and it's 5, right? Every channel has a soap.
Yeah, about 5, yeah.
It's so rare that somebody goes from a British soap to this. You see Jodie Comer, the girl from Killing Eve, like she's one of the very few. And so to go from that in England to this now, we talked about imposter syndrome at lunch. Can you talk about how you go from being one of the very few people who's done this, and how does that feel for you?
I'm still kind of pinching myself, in all honesty. I mean, I know that seems disingenuous, but I'm still like, what am I doing here is insane. Because it just, when I left EastEnders, I chose to leave. I've been there nearly 9 years, and I was enjoying it, but I just always knew I wanted to try other stuff. I wanted to push myself in other ways. So I made the decision, but I was like, hopefully I can carve a career here and do something interesting, but I'm probably not going to get to, do the kind of things that I ended up doing.
Also, sorry to interrupt, but also possibly because although there have been a couple of people who've done it, it's so rare that a person of colour would do it. That one of the white soap opera people might do it, but not you.
Yeah, and that was something that the journey I went on. I was a pretty naive 16-year-old. I grew up in the countryside. I hadn't really grappled with how my identity sort of affected the way I walked through the world in any sort of intellectual way until, actually kind of until my mid-20s. But when I got into EastEnders and I was working with actors, South Asian actors who were playing my parents and uncles and that sort of thing, of the previous generation, they had to work so hard to get any foothold at all. And I just hadn't thought about that. And then I was like, oh yeah, there's only like a handful of them on TV when I was growing up, and we would all like make such a big deal of it. And it must have been so difficult, and it's still going to be difficult. And so not only have I got to worry about that, I've got to worry about the fact that I'm also going to be pigeonholed because I'm in a soap.
Yeah.
So it was a kind of realization of the sort of structure of things.
So what makes you think you could be the one that does it?
I don't know. I think there maybe was some delusion at some point. I mean, I think a lot of actors talk about at some level you have to have some sort of delusional fantasy of what is possible.
Yeah.
And I think maybe in the UK specifically, we get told to like just rein it in. Don't be so. Don't dream about anything. Just be, And I guess I've definitely like fell victim to that mentality a bit, but thankfully there's obviously something in the back of my mind that was like, yeah, but still keep trying, So yeah, I just sort of, I didn't have that high an expectation when I left, but I just knew I wanted to try something and see what I could do. There's some great actors who've been on soaps who forged a great career in the UK on stage, on TV, and I thought that'd be great if I can do that, and that's brilliant. I just had never thought that I would get to do the kind of things that I did, and I've just been sort of lucky that opportunities sort of landed in the right time, in the right place, and I got to this point, which I guess I'm still pinching myself and I just can't take it for granted.
Was the turning point yesterday when you got yesterday? It then led to all of this?
That was like a real, sort of
level
in terms of doors opening and it was crazy. Thank you.
It was fantastic. When you got to a certain point where you felt, maybe you don't feel this way, but you felt like, okay, I've done the acting roles that I wanted to do, I've played the roles I want to play, but I know I can do more. You started writing and you started to produce. What did you hope to achieve, or what do you still hope to achieve in that space?
Specificity, I think. You know, on one hand, I feel so lucky that I'm getting to do so much great stuff that just would not have been on the cards for a person like me, even 10 years ago. And that I love that I get to sort of play. You know, the movie that we just opened last night here, Bubble and Squeak, I played Uncle Declan. Thank you.
I'm so glad you two went.
Yeah.
And you know, it was so
Yeah, my friends.
it was hard to get into.
Yeah, so I heard.
It was done, yeah.
You know, I played Uncle Declan. The role wasn't written specifically, and that's great. I get to do that. I get to play other roles, you know, that weren't written specifically. Like yesterday, it wasn't written specifically for a brown guy.
Yeah.
But there has to be space within all of that for specific stories.
Yeah.
And I think really the best way to do that is for us to tell them ourselves, you know? So.
Can you tell us a bit about Bubble and Squeak, what it's about?
Bubble and Squeak is about a couple who are on honeymoon in a fictional country where cabbages are illegal. And the whole thing opens with them being interrogated by Border Patrol because of suspicion that they're trying to smuggle cabbages into the country.
It's so dangerous.
I always thought that. It's an edge-of-your-seat thriller. It's not a comedy at all. No, it's great. It's very funny. And it kind of goes from there, and it's the writer-director Evan Tui, it's his first movie. He describes it as like a screwball comedy. And I keep it.
We were talking about yesterday, or was it yesterday? Day before.
Day before?
Okay. A couple of days we were talking about how I was saying, how the heck. So I have a production company and we pitch shows, and so often the things that we're pitching are so clear, and you understand the audience. But if I went into a room and said, "Hey, I want to make a movie about cabbages being illegal," that I don't know if I feel that confident about that sale.
Yeah.
How do you, now that you are a writer and you're trying to get shows off the ground, are you really conscious of what the buyer wants? Are you thinking, fuck the man, sorry, there's a child in the audience, screw the mandate, I don't care about the mandate, I'm going to do what I think is right for me? And when you are pitching those shows, do you feel at all like, I don't know if I am the right person to be able to sell the show? Do they want it to be more globally appealing with a white story with a white lead?
I try not to think about it too much because there is a reality there that you kind of do have to consider. But when it comes to sort of creatively doing something like this script that I'm writing at the moment, it's so specifically about something that I just can't consider anything in terms of like what might be needed to, you know, X, Y, Z. You get to that point now, we're sort of getting to that point now where we have to start thinking about sort of strategizing a little bit. But when it comes to sort of the core of it, you can't think about that stuff when you're creating it, when you're birthing it. And I think ultimately with any art form, the more you can stick to your guns, the better it's going to be. And like, not to sort of cynically bring it back to Bubble and Squeak, but I look at that movie and I go, Evan had such a clear vision for that movie from the beginning, from like 15 years ago he started writing it. And what I saw on the screen last night was that, and it was because it got protected, and he didn't allow himself to be sort of shunted around and sort of influenced in any sort of heavy way. And I feel that that's kind of probably a great way to, you know, if you want to tell specific stories about our identities, our backgrounds, no one knows it better than us, you know, so, yeah.
What is the long game for you? Is there a
world domination, yeah.
Oh, obviously, and to make cabbages illegal. Is there, do you look into, you've got kids, you've got two children who are very similar ages to my children.
Yeah.
When I think of my career and where I want to be in 25 years, most of it is what am I doing that my children will respect and think, God, Dad did something. They don't call me Dad, they call me Abu. Abu did something wild. What's your motivator when you think of the work you want to do and where you might want to be in 20 years?
I think it's just, yeah, it's, you do want to just think that you're moving the conversation forward a bit more, you know?
Yeah.
That there's still so far to go. Like, I still, as proud as I am of the progress that's happened and that I'm a beneficiary of, and that I'm, you know, but it's like there's still stuff to do in terms of pushing things forward, trying to get stories made and perspectives sort of voiced, but still it's not easy to do. I think one of the most important things is throwing the ladder back down. You know, there's always people who are trying to get, and if you can, in your privileged position, help, that's really important, I think. Yeah, I just kind of do, I think I've got an idea of sort of where I want to go with stuff and what my truth is, what my instincts are, and you know, I think I just want I want to feel that when I look back in 20 years that things have moved on, that, you know, it's not, there's nothing that's precluding my children, for example, from doing things that maybe I would have been precluded from doing.
Yeah. You've been in show business for how long? 15 years?
Well, I'm in 34, 18 years nearly. Yeah.
I do, even though I don't think it's anywhere near where it needs to be, I do think it has changed so greatly. I've only been in this for 8 years, but I'm seeing so much more representation now than I would have 10 years ago.
I'm really intrigued because the timeline when we were talking, so I got EastEnders when I was 16, so that was 2007. And you said you moved to the US in 2006?
2008.
2008.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, there's an interesting sort of overlap in terms of like the timeline.
Yeah.
Can I ask like what motivated you to move here? And have you been in the local area for this for all that time you've been in Salt Lake?
I live in Salt Lake. I choose to make my home. This is my primary residence. You know, gosh, this is way too Debbie Downer to say, but when you ask what was the motivation to move to America, my sweet and grand answer is my husband, the love of my husband, and that is true. However, I chose to move from the UK because I didn't want to feel like a second-class citizen anymore. That truly is it. And it wasn't because I was trying to be an entertainer. I never planned to be an entertainer. This just came out of nowhere. And so I moved over here just for a happier life. There's a term in England that we use for Pakistanis, or so we don't use for Pakistanis, other people use for Pakistanis, which is paki. And I was just sick of hearing that all the time.
So you got it a lot?
All the time. I'm from the north. Do you know what's really funny is, not funny, you know what's really interesting is...
Racism is hilarious.
I'm doing a comedy show about it, it's wild.
Please don't put that out of context.
That's the takeaway. What was so wild is I thought, stupidly, that whatever fame I'd garnered or whatever success I'd garnered in America, the first show I was on was a big global success, and so I thought, well, that'll impact my life in England as well. And I was at my mom's house. She lives in Manchester, and she lives about 20 minutes away from the city centre. And so I said to my mom, I haven't been on a bus since I was like 17. I'm going to take a bus from your house to the city centre. And she was like, why would you, like, you've got a car? I was like, it's a cultural experience. And I'm really interested to go on the bus. And I went, and on that bus, somebody said, oh, here we are in the packet, you know, the one we paid to live for. So paid for to live. And I turned to him and I was like, by the looks of what you're wearing, I think you'll find I pay for you to live. I pay millions, you don't work, clearly. And so it reminded me of why I choose to not live in the UK. I've no shade to the UK. Look, most people in the UK are incredible. But it's those few who are so nasty who are the most vocal about their disdain for you. And so living there, my first 18 years was in a place called Yorkshire. It was so common that I had said to my family from a very young age, England is not my home. My mum remembers me saying that at like 7 or 8. I was like, we're not welcome here. Why are we here? And so my goal was always to move somewhere else. Always.
And so you moved here with work? This is like
Well, I had a
with your company.
Yeah, I had a company, and then I launched a few companies that did very well. And then at 32, I decided to sell them, and I was going to retire, but like semi-retire. I was going to have children and travel the world. And then a week later, Netflix asked if I would be on the show with Queer.
Does anyone? What was that like? So you get this call. What was your initial reaction?
I thought that I was being scammed. Because it came through Instagram. Somebody at Netflix casting was like, I work for the Netflix casting department. And I was like, yeah, of course you do, dickhead. And so that went on for a few days, and then they asked me if I'd audition, and they'd been looking for the person to be the star guy on Queer Eye for about 6 months. And they had auditioned 3,000, almost 2,000 people. And they're like, we can't find the one, and we start shooting in less than a month. And so they asked for a Skype call, we did a Skype call, it went very well, and they were like, we think you're the one. And I was like, you're just saying that to be nice, you know I don't want the job, I don't care about the job, I don't need any of this. And they said, well, will you just come out to LA? And I was like, here are my conditions. I don't know who I thought I was, but I was like, you will fly me first class, I want to stay at that hotel, you'll pay me for my time. And they were like, that's not how this works. I was like, I don't need your job, you're asking me to come and work. Like, I'm not working for free. And so they agreed. And I went to this audition, and it was a 3-day audition. And because I didn't want it, I truly was just there to make gay friends, because I didn't have any gay friends. And so I was like, oh, there's a bunch of gays there, and I'm so friendly, I'm gonna make a gay friend. And so I went, and because I didn't care or need it, it was the easiest thing in the world. I was just able to be myself. And then at the end of the first day, they're like, it's you. Will you stay the next 2 days? We're gonna build the rest of the cast. But you got the job.
Can I? Yeah. Okay. Pretty incredible. I love the show. I find it always basically makes me cry. And I've always been so interested by how intimate it is and how intimately you guys interact with these people's lives. Because it's kind of a show about healing, right? It's kind of a show about that, and it feels so wholesome to me, and I think that's probably why it has such global success and why it's so universally adored, I find. How did you get any guidance on how to do that without, messing someone's head up or re-traumatizing or whatever? And how hard can that be? And how have you learned any sort of tricks along the way that really sort of help you every time you have to sort of do this? Because you do it. I mean, you must have lost count how many times how many lives you've changed.
The interesting thing is, I was the only one of the cast who had never done television before. I'd never been on a set before, and so I was really nervous about how this was all going to go down. The first day, I was the first scene, and unscripted worked very differently from scripted. It would literally, I turned up on set, and they said, "Okay, you've got 3 hours, fill it." And I was like, "With what?" And they're like, "Talk to that person, get to know that person." I was like, "For 3 hours, this stranger?" "Yeah." "And we're just going to film it, and there's a crew of 40 people who are in this room who are watching you." And I was like, "This seems great." This is very well publicized at this point, but the first person, we call them my heroes, the person within the first few minutes found out that I was Muslim, and I was Pakistani. So he started speaking Spanish with me, and I said, "Oh, I'm not Latino." And he was like, "You're not Mexican?" I was like, "No, I'm not Mexican." I said, "I'm Pakistani." And he was like, "Wait, I know that word." And I was like, "Oh, how do you know that word?" And he said, "It was on, oh my God, are you a terrorist?" No, legitimately, that was his exact question. He was like, "Pakistanis are terrorists." And I said, "Well, let me tell you why that's not appropriate to ask." And that really set the tone for how this was going to go for me. And my experience on the show is so different to my castmates. And so I sat there for a second thinking, Tan Safdar, my name before I got married was Safdar, Tan Safdar would have cut a bitch. If I wasn't on TV, that conversation would have gone very differently. But I was like, oh, I've got to be really sweet about this. But also I thought, I learned so much as a kid. We used to run to and from school because if we didn't win, you would be beaten. And so I learned really early on that me literally fighting back and swearing and shouting back was never going to change that person's opinion of whether I deserve to live in England or not. And so I learned to just ask the person, why do you hate me so? Why do you hate my family? We've done nothing wrong. We pay our taxes. My parents work every hour that God sent. We're not taking from you. We're providing for them. We had something called an off license, which is kind of like a bodega. And we were the only one in our small community. I was like, we're providing for you guys. Like, why would you want to kill us? And why do you want us to leave? And so I think that prepared me for, I'm going to say, radical kindness on Queer Eye. When somebody's telling me their deepest, darkest secrets, I'm like, I understand your pain. My family's been through this our entire lives, and yes, I don't relate to your exact story, but I understand what it feels like to be downtrodden, to feel like there's no hope, to feel like you don't have a place and you are so alone. And so I didn't necessarily, I thought I needed training. The only training I really needed was what line can I cross on camera, or what do these things mean, this jargon that's sprouting my way, what does that mean? But as far as human connection, and how do we make this translate to people all over the world, that weirdly is the easiest part of the job for me. And look, on this job I put people in clothes, but I don't care really about that. The reason why I enjoy my category is when you are with somebody in a fitting room and they're just in their underwear, you get to ask the most profound questions, and you get the most honest version because they are in their most vulnerable state. Look, if I were to see any of you in your underwear, I'm sure you'd be fucking panicked. But in a fitting room, if I were to say, I want you to look at yourself and I want you to tell me how you feel about who you are as a person, and then it leads to so much more than just, I like this part of my body. It's, how do I feel about who I want to be? Because right now I feel horrible about myself and I feel like I can't possibly move on in life. And so I think the only, or my greatest gift on the show is not me putting them in a really cute dress. It's, what can I say to you that makes it really clear that you are not alone in this, and I feel your pain, and we're going to help you get over that. Sorry, that was really long-winded.
What a guy. I think it's just the level of empathy on that show, I just think is wonderful.
Thank you.
So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Can I ask a bit about your childhood, like sort of growing up in?
Ask me whatever you want.
In Manchester, you grew up in Manchester.
I didn't. I grew up in a place called Doncaster.
Oh, Doncaster, yeah.
And my family then moved to Manchester because of all the abuse.
When you were how old?
17.
Okay.
Yeah.
So but your childhood was all, you grew up in Doncaster.
Yeah.
What? I'm just intrigued, like, because I feel like we had quite different experiences.
Yeah. But also so many similarities.
Yeah, like my parents ran an off license, but I grew up in the countryside. We were the only brown family from Wales in any direction. Yeah. But it's done this very strange thing where until I met so many people like me when I moved to London, did I even start thinking about the effect that had on me, actually, that I was living with racism, but just in a very different way.
Yeah.
But how, I mean, I guess obviously it was hard, but how did you come out of that without, it feels to me like you've come out of it with so much empathy and so much kindness and so much, it just feels to me that I don't know how you do that, because it feels like you've been through a lot, to have gone through that when you were a child.
I think that you make a choice. You make a choice as to whether it's going to affect your life forever, and you're going to begrudge your upbringing. But really, I just think that everything that we go through as Asians in England, South Asians in England, it sets me up for the kindness. I think if I just had a normal, happy childhood, I don't know if I'd be as friendly and nice. So often I think, I can't believe I made it through. Like you said, I know this isn't going to sound true, but I still have those pinky moments. I feel that every day. When I'm sat here thinking, I'm tan from Doncaster, from council estate, which means the project's like, this shouldn't happen to people like us. But I think it has, because I knew that I could use all of that shit from childhood and do something good because of it. And I think if I'd had such a sunny childhood, I see so many people who have really lovely childhoods and they just can't process adulthood. I'm like, I think that all of the adversity really helped me be a more grateful adult. And I think it helps me connect with people in a much greater way. So many times on any of the shows that I do, people have not had the experience I've had, but they're from working class families, they've got a job that is a tough job, they've got a life that is so much tougher than my life, and so I think they just want to hear that I've seen it too, I've been there too. And now that I'm in it, I never thought that it was possible for people like us to be here, but now that I'm in it, I just think, what more can I do? And I have got, quite honestly, I've gotten really arrogant with it, and I don't care. I just think, I'm in a real position of power. I'm on a couple of big shows on Netflix, and you can't tell me shit. And if you say, oh no, we can't tell that story on Queer Eye this week, I will say, the fuck we can't. If a producer says, hey, we don't want to have, I was about to say something that I don't want to say, that we can't go to this Indian restaurant, and we don't want to do a celebration of Indian food today. My response is, I think you'll find that I won't be on set today then. And I know that's so harsh, but I'm like, I'm the only brown one on set. I need somebody fighting for me, and if I'm the one, I'm the one. And so whenever I have a lot of meetings, almost every day, Zooms, and I told you something a few days ago that was wild with a UK company. The amount of times that crazy shit is said to me, I just think, I am actually in a position of great power. When you have financial independence, and I had financial independence before becoming an entertainer, I didn't need this. And so when somebody wants something of me, I can say, and how's that gonna move my people's story forward? Oh, you want me to tell this story as if my people are terrorists? No, I'm not gonna do that. We're not gonna lean into that conversation. I'm gonna tell you why we're not. You want me to do this event and you want me to pretend to be a taxi driver? That's not gonna happen. We're not just taxi drivers, we're doctors, we're lawyers, we're actors, we're entertainers. I've gotten so comfortable saying, what am I gonna do? The main reason I wanted to take the show, and I mentioned this at our lunch, I was not gonna take Queer Eye. I tried to quit Queer Eye multiple times. The reason I chose to continue on with Queer Eye is my husband, who's a lovely white man, who's been my husband for 16 years. I had moaned for the first few years saying, why does no one care about South Asian stories? We are natural entertainers. We are the loudest people I know. We come out of the womb with fucking jazz hands like that. If you've been to an Asian household, we will bring you in, we'll cook for you, we'll entertain you as if we're putting on the Oscars for you. Like we're gonna make sure you have a wicked time. And so,
even if we're broken by the end of it,
absolutely, to our own family's detriment. I'm like, I've neglected my kids today, but have you had fun? Great, I'll see you later. And so when people suggest that we can't, it makes no sense that we would be the entertainers. Why wouldn't we be? We've spent our whole lives doing this. And so my husband was like, you might get to be that person. There's never been a you on television before. And I was like, that's scary as fuck. No one wants to be the first one at anything because then you are the punching bag for everyone. But I was like, I might actually get to encourage some people, some queer, brown people, also queer Muslim people to believe I don't have to commit suicide because my family will disown me. I might get to live a life. I might get to live past 25, which let me tell you, up until the time I was 15, 16, I didn't think I was gonna live past 25. I thought, 25, I will have to kill myself because my family will never accept this because they've never seen a version of this, ever. When I told my mom I was gay, she was like, what does that mean? And when I explained to her, she was like, well, I've never even heard of that. It was so alien to her. And I'm like, this is why we need people like us on TV where people can watch you on EastEnders or on Yesterday or on Station 11 and be like, if I can like Himesh and think he's a wicked actor, why can't I like every other Asian that I see, give them a shot? When you see me and you think, I hate the fags, but I really like tan France. Yeah, I'm not that different from any other gay person. I just have got brown skin. If you love me, you can love the rest of my people. Yeah. I'm really excited. That's why I continue to be on camera.
I'm really intrigued by that idea of people like us shouldn't be here. I find it, I've thought that a lot. I think I sometimes still think it a lot. And it's so unhealthy. And I think we just internalized something that we've been told for centuries, really.
Yeah. However, I don't feel that way anymore. I used to think, I don't know if I'm meant to be here because this was kind of...
That's the thing, we need to get out from under it, right?
Yeah, at this point, within the last couple of years in particular, I walk into a room thinking, I work hard and I'm on the same show as those guys and they're walking in confidently. Why can't I walk in to say, I deserve to be here? Why wouldn't I be here? I went to Himesh's party, yesterday. What was it? A premiere party?
Yeah, after party.
And I got to the door and the security was going to let us in, but for a second I thought, gosh, I have no right to just walk and say, let me in. But she was like, are you on the list? I was like, yeah, I am. But even if I wasn't, why don't I didn't say this, but I thought, I'm going to tell you, I'm Tam Pants and I have just as much right to be here as that influencer.
Maybe more.
I'm not afraid to say I deserve to be in that room. If that person's there, why shouldn't I be there?
Yeah, I need to do a bit more of that. I think I have a lot of that still. The sort of I shouldn't be here. Don't worry about it.
I don't think in our position at this point. I'm sick of apologizing.
Yeah. I definitely do it too much.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. When it comes to unscripted, and I'm really curious, do we have any time left? Would you ever do unscripted?
Instinctively, the answer is no.
I'm not talking about like Amazon to get me out of your life. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if ever someone were to say, do you want to do a documentary about something in particular that exposes who you are, not just, I'm not saying you're hiding behind the character, but you actually get to hide behind the character.
Yeah.
Would you ever be willing to expose yourself? That sounds really appropriate.
Listen. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think my instinct as an actor is I don't give too much of myself. I still grapple with how much of that, it is worth doing. And actually, I think I found myself thinking about it too much from some sort of arbiter of what's good and what's not. I think ultimately it's up to you, and I'm finding my comfort level with it. But I think there is. I sometimes think about sort of my family, their story, a sort of intergenerational thing. This is a long-winded story, but I never met my dad's dad. He died 2 months before I was born. And many years ago, I was at my parents' house, not long after I'd moved to London, and a box had appeared, either from our attic or someone's attic, and my dad had brought it down, and it was like an old box of film, like 8mm rolls of film, and a sort of reel-to-reel editor, and the projector wasn't working. So the only way I could watch this reel, I was like, I wonder what it is, was like putting it on and then rolling it, just hand cranking, watching it, and it was wedding videos from my parents' wedding, which I'd never seen. And it was the first time I'd seen my grandfather move. I'd seen pictures of him. But I was so emotional about it. I was like, this is insane. And the first time I'd seen like footage of my parents when they were younger and all this stuff. And I just went, look at all the iPhones that are out like now, how easy it is for us to document these things. For basically 10 years now, I've been going, I should sit down with my parents at some point and have a conversation, an interview. I did it. I'm really glad I did this with I had a great aunt in Wellington in New Zealand. She died a few years ago. She was nearly 100.
Wow.
She'd been in New Zealand since the 40s, and I just sat down with a camera and interviewed her. It was all in Gujarati, because she didn't speak any English despite living there for a long time. But I'm so glad I did that, because she died fairly suddenly, and it was so valuable to her immediate family to have that. And so I still think I want to do something like that with my parents, and maybe that could become something that then it feels exposing, but I just feel like I still don't see that story enough.
Well,
we talk about the immigrant story, the whole thing, but I just think there's something very specific about the South Asian experience in the UK, which is quite different to the South Asian experience here.
Very.
Because there's a whole wealth of history and colonialism and everything behind it.
The reason I ask is, I know that most people here at Sundance are here to focus on scripted work or documentaries. However, I love how many South Asians are now getting a chance to be in scripted work. The reason why I ask about unscripted is so often, even though it's wonderful to see that representation on TV and scripted projects, unscripted, there's something I think is so special about it, because you can write a character that it feels so real, but when somebody just gets to sit there and says, this is who I am, and this is why my story is important, I think it changes the game for that community so greatly when it's not just an idea of a character, it's not just a role you're playing, it's this is who I am.
Yeah, and because I think of the lack of representation up to this point, there's a perception perhaps from people who don't know it that we're a monolith.
Yeah,
you know?
Of course.
And you will just exist in stereotypes.
Yeah.
The stereotype of the Indian auntie, the stereotype of the XYZ, and how many stereotypes, they're just endless. Whereas I go, my mum is so different to her cousin.
Yeah.
I'm so different to so many people. We're all individuals, and I just think of course there's so many similarities amongst our parents' generation, but they all must have such a specific view on their journey, their experience of living in this new country, which they now call home, but how many of them have ever felt that it is actually home? Yeah. Like my parents do feel it's home. They go back to India and they go, I don't think we could live here. I mean, it's nice to be back, but I don't think we could live here now. Whereas I know I've got friends whose parents are like, eventually we're going to go back. And that's such a different experience. So I think the more we can get to the truth of things, the more people will understand that there's just a million voices.
We've only got 5 minutes left, but I want to use this as wisely as we possibly can. I've got a question that I really am trying to ask you, because you're in the scripted space. You also came to the Writers' Lab.
I did the Writers' Lab last year. Yeah.
Is community of people of colour important when it comes to creating a project and getting it off the ground? Is that helpful to you? Because I'm assuming there's a lot of people out here thinking, I want to get a show written, produced, made, and here at Sundance. Have you seen extra value, greater value? There's no difference between whether it's a Caucasian person, a black person, or a person within our community that can support.
On some levels, obviously there's no difference in the sense of a role within a sort of ecosystem of whatever you're trying to do, but it's kind of important to have someone at least by your side through any endeavour who gets it.
Yeah.
Especially if it's something like the project I'm working on is this thing called Brown Baby, which is an adaptation of my friend's memoir. It's so specifically about race, about parenting, about loss, but very specifically about a sort of Indian, Gujarati British identity. And to have people by your side who get it, as you're crafting it, is pretty invaluable, really. But then there's a whole other world of community that I found from the Writers' Lab. Friends of mine who I know are just going to be pals for years and years, because you go through such a specific experience together. Like I came out of that experience, I went into it going, I'm here just because my pals let me be here with him. I'm a writer, I'm not a writer, I haven't done writing. All these narratives are going in my head. And it ended up being one of the most emotional experiences, of a cathartic experience, and I went away from it going, I guess I am a writer, because everyone else was feeling the same way. Everyone else was feeling like an imposter. And they made it to the Sundance Writers' Lab, but it's a big deal. And we knew that, but at the same time, we're all still grappling with that feeling of, I don't deserve to be here, maybe, and for whatever reason. It could be tied to your identity, it could be something else entirely. But now you've got each other's back, and actually, I was so amazed by the Sundance Institute. I knew of it sort of tangentially, but I had no idea of just how amazing it is, and how this is why this festival is so celebrated, because they've grown talent in a really amazing way.
Couldn't agree more. I'm assuming we're out of time, so on a final note, I will say thank you, Shruti, for having us. Thank you, Daniel, for this wonderful interview. We really appreciate it. So grateful to be here, so thanks for having us. Truly, thanks for having us.
Thank you.